On the 16th of June 2024, 19-year-old Jay Slater vanished after a night out in Tenerife, where he was visiting for a festival with friends. After 3 weeks and extensive searches, there has been no sign of him, but more and more suspicious details are emerging every day, leading many to wonder if there is a lot more to this case than is being portrayed. Let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries and generally disturbing content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can become a Ko-fi member or a channel member to gain access to uncut videos and other perks, or you can leave me a tip by clicking the thanks under this video. Thanks to anyone who considers this. The theories discussed in this video are just speculation, not facts. Please do not attempt to contact or harass anyone mentioned. On the 16th of June, Jay Slater, a 19-year-old apprentice bricklayer from England, went to the Papagayo nightclub in the tourist resort of Playa de las Americas in Tenerife. He had gone to attend the NRG Tenerife Weekender, a popular music festival. It was a typical night for a man of his age on his first holiday without his parents. He spent the evening drinking with his friends and bumped into 2 British men who he was acquainted with, who later invited him to go back with them to their Airbnb. Jay's friend Lucy was tired and decided to call it a night, but Jay stayed out with these 2 men and left with them in the early hours of the morning the next day, around 6 AM. When he arrived at the Airbnb, he contacted numerous friends on social media. A photo he shared on Snapchat at 7:30 AM revealed the Airbnb was in a rural location near the Masca village, about a 45-minute drive from the club. At 8 AM, after deciding to leave the Airbnb, Jay was stood at the bus stop outside and asked the owner what time the next bus to Los Cristianos was. She told him it was not for another 2 hours. At 8:20, she saw him walking fast, alone, in the wrong direction. At 8:25, Jay video called his friend Brad, who was also in Tenerife, telling him he was a long way away from their accommodation, and Brad said that from what he could see, Jay was off-road, and it sounded like he was walking on gravel. 5 minutes later, Jay called Lucy to tell her he'd missed the bus and had started walking back to their accommodation, a journey that would take over 10 hours. He said he was lost in the mountains, his phone was on 1%, he'd cut his leg on a cactus and didn't have any water with him. His phone died at around 8:50, and Lucy said that the last dropped pin showed that his location was off the road. He was reported missing shortly after. Local police and mountain rescue teams searched the area of Jay's last known location on foot with the help of a helicopter, drones, and sniffer dogs. The next day, Tuesday the 18th of June, his family flew out to Tenerife to join the search. His mother, Debbie, appeared on TV, begging anyone who could help to look for him, saying he's out there somewhere or someone knows where he is. She also wondered if he had been taken against his will. A GoFundMe was set up by Lucy to help Jay's family with any costs related to the search. The Lancashire Constabulary, the police force in the county Jay is from, revealed that Spanish police had declined their help after insisting they had the resources they need. There have been a few unconfirmed sightings, including one in the village of Santiago del Tide, around 3 miles away from Jay's last known location. Another potential sighting was near a church in the area, around 10 hours after his last phone call. Someone claimed they may have seen him with 2 men, looking a bit worse for wear. Despite police, family, friends, locals, and tourists searching the area extensively, no sign of Jay has been found. On the 30th of June, police announced that they'd called off the search for Jay, though made it clear the case is still open and they are pursuing several lines of investigation. In a nutshell, that's the timeline of events of Jay's disappearance, and it's quite a strange situation. He went missing while making his way back from an Airbnb rented by two men he didn't really know that well, but who police don't believe are relevant to the case. It doesn't make sense that he'd be attempting to walk for over 10 hours because he missed a bus, after being told the next one was in 2 hours. I guess the men at the Airbnb didn't have a charger for his phone, but when he missed the bus, why didn't he go back there and ask them to call him a taxi or something? I just can't understand thinking it's a good idea to walk for 10 hours in an unfamiliar foreign country after presumably no sleep, likely hungover, with no charge on his phone, no water, and no idea where he was going. Given the circumstances, it'd hardly be surprising if he got lost, but the search started pretty soon after his final call, and despite a large number of professionals and volunteers using various methods to find him for nearly 2 weeks, there's been no sign of him. It's like he just vanished into thin air. It is possible he fell down somewhere, got injured, or was dehydrated and tried to find shade, and ended in a spot that wasn't too visible, but you'd think after all this time, someone would have spotted him. Tenerife is a pretty small island. You could drive around the entire perimeter in less than 3 hours, and it's highly unlikely he ended up at the other side of the island anyway. Since Jay's disappearance has blown up in the news, some interesting details have surfaced that have led many to wonder if there is more to this. In 2021, Jay and 7 other youths attacked 17-year-old Tom Hilton with a machete, golf clubs, and an axe. Tom suffered serious injuries, including an exposed split skull and wounds on his shoulders and legs. I wasn't able to find a motive for the attack, but the group were also sentenced for offences including intimidation, attempted robbery, and conspiracy to supply Class A drugs, so that may indicate the kind of activities Jay was involved in. He was 18 at the time he was convicted, and was sentenced to an 18-month community order with 25 days of rehabilitation activities and 150 hours of paid work. None of the group spent any time in prison, and they all laughed and joked throughout the trial, without showing any remorse. It has been speculated that Jay's disappearance may be some kind of revenge attack related to Tom Hilton. Perhaps he arranged for someone to kidnap Jay in Tenerife and get rid of him. I personally think this is quite unlikely. The attack occurred in 2021, and the trial was nearly a year ago now. It seems like more effort than necessary to arrange for someone to be kidnapped in a different country than it would be to get revenge in your local area. Given the timeline, it would have taken precise planning and a decent amount of luck to kidnap Jay after he left the Airbnb. It seems he went there in the first place voluntarily, and he couldn't be found because his phone had died. In his final phone call, he said he'd left the Airbnb, so it's not like the men he met that night lured him back there and held him captive. It doesn't even sound like Jay was the most involved in the attack. The judge said, quote, "Some of you played a more active role in the violent disorder than others. Some of you carried weapons, some wore balaclavas, but the seriousness of this is the group nature of it." Jay and one of the other members of the group received the shortest sentence in terms of the community order and hours of unpaid work, so I'm guessing he played a less active role than others. I'm not sure why he would have been targeted specifically, while others in the group, who were sentenced more harshly, presumably haven't been kidnapped. Tom, the victim, made a statement on Facebook about the disappearance, quote, "Whoever is writing on these TikToks, give it a rest. This young lad's missing and his family's heartbroken. Put yourself in their shoes. Stop talking nonsense on social and get this lad found, mentioning my name, all this and that. Have some respect and help find this boy and get him back to his family." As I said, the nature of the incident and the other charges such as attempted robbery and conspiracy to supply Class A drugs could paint a picture of the type of life Jay leads. A quick scroll through his social media reveals photos of him with people who are clearly smoking weed and using NOS since around 2020. Since the disappearance, rumours have circulated online that it was related to drugs, that Jay was selling drugs in Tenerife and either took some of them himself or lost them, meaning he owed someone a lot of money. When people with a criminal past go missing or are found dead, people always theorise that someone made them disappear because they owed money for drugs. And usually I think it's unlikely. You can't get money from a dead man, so unless someone is being made an example of, it doesn't really make sense to kill them. Jay could well still be alive though, and with the GoFundMe set up by Lucy currently sitting at over £50,000 in donations, there'd be plenty of money to pay off whatever he might owe. The fundraiser has attracted a lot of criticism. The goal was £30,000 and people have questioned why they'd need so much. You could live in Tenerife for 3 years with that amount of money. The funds are supposed to be supporting the family and volunteers in the search for Jay, presumably covering the costs of flights, accommodation and essentials, though the description on the GoFundMe doesn't actually specify where the money will go. Quote, "Hi everyone, my name is Lucy. I have come on holiday to Tenerife to attend the NRG festival with my friend Jay and another friend. On the last day of the festival, I left alone, earlier than everyone else because I was tired from the weekend. I woke up to a phone call off Jay at 8:30 AM saying he was lost in the mountains, he wasn't aware of his surroundings, he desperately needed a drink, and his phone was on 1%. He had met 2 people on Sunday night and left with them to go to their apartment. Their apartment was miles away from civilization and in a very secluded location. He left at 8 AM and walked half an hour before frantically ringing me when his phone reached 1%. This was 3 days ago now, and no one has seen or heard from him since. His last location was on an off-road track, which was a 10-hour walk from his hotel. The weather conditions up there are terrible for someone in shorts and a t-shirt, both in the day and at night. He has no water for when it's warm through the day, and he has no coat or suitable clothing for when it's cold at night. It was 1 degree and extremely windy when I was out looking for him in the middle of the night. We are all so worried and we just want him home. Please help if you can and share far and wide. Thank you for reading." If it was known that Jay might be missing for a long time, I'd say £30,000 isn't that unreasonable. The costs of accommodation and essentials will all add up, plus it gives the family the opportunity to hire a private investigator if the police didn't manage to find him. But it is a lot of money to ask for up front, just 3 days after he went missing. A lot of people think that Lucy knows more than she's letting on and might be a questionable character herself. It seems she goes on holidays pretty often to places that are popular with tourists looking to party, including Ibiza and Zante. Apparently she's travelled over 30 times in the last 2 years, and no one seems to know how she can afford this at 18 years old. Both her and Jay have been seen wearing expensive designer clothing, again with no obvious explanation as to how they could afford it. Lucy followed a number of accounts on Instagram that seem to have been run by drug dealers, with names like Ibiza Plug. Since this discovery, Lucy has either unfollowed them or the accounts have been deleted. People have been speculating that Lucy as well as Jay sold drugs. Jay somehow got into debt by losing some of the drugs, he got kidnapped, and Lucy knew all about this, so she concocted the tale of him being lost in the mountains, attempting to walk 10 hours back to his hotel, while she figured out how to get the money together for him before setting up the GoFundMe. Perhaps supporting the idea that Jay might have been abducted, here's a quote from a Mirror article. Distraught Debbie told on the first day of the search how she was sent a vile Snapchat message. She said, There's no ransom demand come in yet, but I got a Snapchat about 10 minutes after I got off the plane saying, "Kiss goodbye to your boy, you're never going to see him again. He owes me a lot of money." Which I passed on to police with the number it came from because I had my wits about me at the time and got my eldest son Zach to take a screen grab before it disappeared. There's been that many prank calls that I don't know whether that was one, but I'm passing on information to police that I think could be relevant, and I thought that could be, she added. There's a lot about Lucy's version of events that just doesn't add up. She said his phone was on 1%, but then somehow it didn't die until around half an hour later. She claims to have reported him missing around 35 minutes after the phone call, which honestly is a pretty responsible thing to do, but the majority of people would wait a bit longer, or even head to the location to find their friend themselves before officially declaring him a missing person. I'm not sure I believe that he told her he was walking back and she reported him missing half an hour later, but didn't tell him on the phone to wait where he is and she'd call him a taxi. It's almost like she had some reason to believe he might have been in danger. Yet the night before, she had no qualms leaving him with two men who he apparently barely knew when he was likely under the influence of drugs and alcohol. As far as I'm aware, Lucy is the only source for the claim that Jay planned to walk 10 hours back to his accommodation, and as I said before, this is questionable. Sure, he'd been up all night. By this time, the hangover and come down was probably starting to creep in. He likely wasn't in the best state to make rational decisions. I could buy him attempting a 1 or 2 hour walk back, but 10 hours is ridiculous when he only had to wait 2 hours for the next bus. Lucy claimed he said he was hydrated, so why not go to the shop or a cafe and buy some water? A 10-hour hike through the mountains is hardly going to help with dehydration. The only way I can imagine him attempting such a journey on foot is if he had a good reason to not want to hang around that area and wait for a bus, or to go back to the Airbnb. Mark Williams Thomas, a former British detective who has been investigating the disappearance, stated he had received information suggesting that Jay left the Airbnb feeling scared and he didn't want to return. It's not clear exactly why. His casual Snapchat story shortly before would imply that he didn't believe he was in danger at that point. One of the men who was renting the Airbnb that Jay stayed in was interviewed by the Daily Mail. 31-year-old Ayub Kasim stated, quote, "The only comment I have to make is that Jay came to the house alive and he left the house alive. I let the geezer stay at mine because he had nowhere else to go. His friends had all left him. I know Jay through friends. I'm not going to bring someone back to mine if I don't know them. I'm doing the geezer a favour and now my face is all over the news. It's a bit mental. I haven't even done anything." He insisted he didn't have an argument with Jay and had given him a blanket to sleep with, which can be seen in Jay's final snap story. "If I'd fallen out with him, would he even come to mine? There were no problems. You've seen the last images of him with his red blanket around him. I don't know if he had beef elsewhere because I don't know him that well. I only know him through friends. He's a cool guy, Jay. He ain't got a problem with me. I haven't got a problem with him or his mates. We just all talked to each other and everything was sweet. I've spoken to the Spanish police and they've told me not to speak to anyone, which is why I've been quiet. I've not spoken to Mark Williams Thomas or anyone like him because he doesn't have any jurisdiction in Tenerife and I haven't done anything wrong." Interestingly, in 2015, Ayub was sentenced to 9 years and 9 months in prison after he was discovered to be the ringleader of a London-based crime gang who were importing heroin and crack cocaine to Cardiff. So he can't have been out of prison that long when he went to Tenerife. This is another potential link between Jay and drugs. Now, for all I know, Ayub was fully rehabilitated and is now a law-abiding citizen. Alternatively, drugs is a pretty good explanation for why a 19-year-old, with past convictions related to drug dealing, went back to a 31-year-old's Airbnb after a party who had recently spent nearly 10 years in prison for drug-related crimes. Although police stated that both Ayub and the other man are irrelevant to Jay's disappearance, they recently went back to the Airbnb to search for any potential evidence, so make of that what you will. It has been speculated that Jay and maybe Lucy might have been selling drugs for Ayub, and that led to his disappearance. I don't think Jay or Lucy are some big-time drug lords or anything, but it's plausible that they might sell occasionally at festivals for a bit of extra cash. It does seem a bit of a stretch that Jay could have got himself in £30,000 worth of debt. The way people are talking, it's like 300 grams of cocaine just fell out of his back pocket and got lost. Some have suggested he stole the drugs, which I guess is more plausible than him losing them. Maybe he stole them from Ayub before he left, and that's why he didn't want to go back. Alternatively, perhaps his apparent desire to avoid the Airbnb had something to do with the revelation that he allegedly stole a £12,000 Rolex from someone the night before he vanished, and bragged about it on Snapchat. This hasn't been validated in terms of a reported theft, but Mark, the former police detective, seems to believe it, noting that Jay's friends said that he would not make that up, and that he discussed it with them later in the night. Maybe the Rolex belonged to Ayub or someone he knows, and when he found out Jay had stolen it, he kicked him out of the apartment, possibly in a bad state. Or Jay left before Ayub realised, and that's why he didn't want to hang around waiting for the bus, and why the last location sent from his phone was not on a main road. Maybe he was worried Ayub would find him. Not a lot is known about the other man that was staying with Ayub. He apparently is quite a well-known person in the area and is referred to as Johnny Vegas. This has led people to believe that if these men wanted to make Jay disappear, they may have had the connections to cover it up. This could also explain why the police in Tenerife declined the offer of help from British police. If there was any corruption at play here, they likely wouldn't want outsiders finding out. That said, I have heard that in the last couple of days, the police in Tenerife have now accepted help from the British police. After all the questionable details that have been revealed in this case, plus the alleged shadiness surrounding the GoFundMe, some have even wondered if the whole disappearance is a scam, and Jay's family and friends are all in on it. Given Jay's criminal past, you arguably couldn't put it past him to fake his own disappearance if he thought he'd profit from it and get away with it. His mother Debbie's reaction has been the subject of much scrutiny. In her TV appearances, her voice sounds quite emotional, but she doesn't appear to be crying at all. At times, it even looks like she's trying, unsuccessfully, to squeeze out some tears. Personally, I don't think it's fair to judge her on this. Everyone that's saying she must have known what happened or she's involved in it has likely never been in the situation she's in right now. Everyone acts differently in highly stressful situations and while being filmed for TV. Just because she isn't crying doesn't mean she isn't devastated. Debbie also reportedly hasn't been out searching in the mountains, which would make more sense if she knew Jay wasn't actually missing. There's not a lot of point in flying out to Tenerife if you're not going to be actively searching for your missing son. This certainly wouldn't be the first case of a faked disappearance for financial gain. Perhaps the most famous case in England was the kidnapping of 9-year-old Shannon Matthews, who was found nearly a month later in the house of her mother's boyfriend's uncle. It turned out to be a scam set up by her mother Karen and Karen's boyfriend to generate money from the publicity. Personally, I don't think Jay's disappearance is a scam, though I don't really have any better answers to many of the questions in this case. There is a lot that doesn't add up, but the whole thing has been clouded with nonsense that has spread like wildfire on social media, and it's hard to know which details are true and which aren't. Every day, new people are coming out saying they have evidence of some ridiculous conspiracy, coming up with laughable theories, from Jay being stuck to a cactus, to him being abducted by the same person responsible for the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Not to mention suggestions like shouting auto glass repair, and if Jay is in the area, he'll shout back auto glass replace. I guess the moral of the story is don't go missing if you're a British person unless you want your disappearance to turn into a meme. Call me boring, but I still think the most plausible theory is that Jay got lost in the wilderness and no one has happened to come across him yet. He'd been on the sesh for 3 days at this point. He made the irrational decision to go back to Ayub's Airbnb, probably thinking it was perfectly rational because he was under the influence of alcohol and God knows how many drugs. After a short while at the Airbnb, he probably started to sober up and wanted to go back to his accommodation, not realizing he was so far away. The Airbnb owner didn't speak good English and made a hand signal to say that the bus would arrive at 10 AM. It's entirely possible that he misunderstood her and set off walking in an attempt to find a different way to get back, or even to find a cafe where he could get some water and possibly charge his phone. I think there was a reason that he didn't want to go back to the Airbnb, whether that was drug related or because of the Rolex he stole, but I'm not convinced that he was kidnapped because of any of that. Whether or not he really was attempting to walk over 10 hours back to his accommodation, he likely got lost somewhere and passed out from dehydration. Maybe he fell and got seriously injured and was unable to move. Either way, I hate to say it, and I really hope I'm wrong with this, but I would be very surprised if Jay is still alive at this point. Tenerife is a small island, and there were plenty of people searching for him, but it wouldn't be that hard to miss a dead body obscured by foliage, especially in an area that's been described as treacherous. I'm not totally dismissing all the suspicious details surrounding this case, and I wouldn't be surprised if there is a bit more to all this. But the theories apart from the one I just described all seem very convoluted and lack any actual evidence to support them. Jim might have been selling drugs, he might have stolen a Rolex, he might have had a disagreement with Ayub, his friends might not have been 100% honest when describing the events from their perspective, possibly to cover up potential criminal activity. All these possibilities could be true and still have nothing to do with Jay's actual disappearance. This video has by no means covered every single detail in this case. It's already so complex and hard to follow, but I hope it has provided a useful summary. Each new day seems to introduce more revelations, allegations, and speculation, and the case is everywhere in the news in England right now, so I guess we'll just have to see what happens and keep hoping that Jay is found safe. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts and theories in the comments, plus any suggestions you might have for a future video. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my Ko-fi members and channel members whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time in a new video.